Hello and welcome to another installment of How Can Employment Law and HR Save Your Business? In today's video, we're going to be talking about managing grievances in the workplace. As always, my name is Roy Magara. I'm an employment solicitor at Magara Law, and I have the privilege of being joined today again by Zoe Lidster, who is a HR consultant extraordinaire at Harwood HR Solutions. So without further ado, Zoe, over to you.
Thanks, Roy. Definition of grievances then. Grievances are concerns, problems or complaints that employees raise with their employers. As you can see by the broadness of the terms, a grievance can cover an issue to do with the employment relationship, their employment, their manager, their colleagues, workspace, etc., etc. Whilst you can get a grievance as a standalone matter, it will often be combined though with another issue or a process. So for example, a whistleblowing allegation may actually be a grievance, or maybe when they're going through a disciplinary procedure, an employee might then raise a grievance as to how that procedure, how they're being treated through that procedure. A simple question when you communicate with an employee is to ask yourself, are they raising a complaint, a concern or a problem? If they are, then you do need to treat that then as a grievance.
Indeed. Thank you, Zoe. And while we just take a quick break from that, let's have a look at some of the risks from straying away from good grievance procedure practice. And we're going to use a case study. It's a current case, actually, and we're just going to use the initials AT and F. In this particular case, the claimant is bringing a claim against the employer for unfair dismissal and victimization concerning discrimination. Essentially, the colleague had raised a grievance, or the claimant rather had raised a grievance against a colleague who had made racist remarks against another colleague. The person who the claimant made the grievance to was the operations manager of the business. However, the operations manager of the business, it turned out, was very good friends with the colleague who had allegedly made said racist remarks. And instead of going through the grievance procedure properly, or at the very least ensuring that there was a third party or some other party who could be objective and be able to make the right decision throughout, the operations manager decided to call the colleague, the alleged racist or abuser, and told her exactly what the complaint was about, who had said what had happened, and told her that she had free rein to do whatever she wanted in the business nonetheless. And sure enough, unfortunately, the perpetrator then told a number of other key members of staff that the claimant was someone who was best friend, so-called, with the person who then made the racist remarks about, and was a telltale and was a snitch. So much so that the claimant says, fabricated evidence against her to suggest that she had physically abused other clients. Now, the client in this instance, the claimant in this instance, felt that she had no choice but to leave the employer and bring a claim against the employer. We're going to pause there for a moment, and I'll tell you a bit more about how this case is developing a bit later on.
Okay, great. Thanks, Roy. So let's just look at receiving a grievance then. Even if a grievance is raised to you verbally, then it's still a valid grievance and it does need dealing with. This highlights the importance really for managers, employers to be able to identify when a complaint is being raised. Now, I would always kind of caveat with, that not every little moan and groan is necessarily a grievance, and talk it through with that individual. But if you think they have got a real concern or an issue or a problem, then do be alert to that and look down the route of, do I need to treat this as a grievance? The difficulty with a verbal grievance, though, is that this can be communicated at any point at any time. So whether it's in a formal meeting or just passing, so someone might just pop into your office and make a quick comment and then leave. But be mindful that, was that them raising a problem to me? There is obviously the potential then for a verbal grievance not to be recorded correctly or remembered, in quite the right way. If it's said in passing, you might not remember all of the points. So the best way forward really is to ask the employee to put their grievance down in writing for you, with as much information as possible, and ask the employee to ensure it's accurate, Or if you jot that down when they leave, then ask the employee, say, oh, I noted this down, was this right, was this the problem that you were raising to me, just to ensure that you then manage that that issue in the right way. So there are two ways of then dealing with a grievance, and the first one that you would always try to look to use is the informal procedure in any instance, really, other than in the case of perhaps where something is extremely serious. You would want to go down the route of trying to resolve it informally in the first instance. It can be used when, as I've said, it's not when a grievance perhaps is not so serious. So maybe some examples of that could be someone doesn't like the position they're sat in the office because the aircon pumps down on them, or the lighting's not quite right. Those kinds of things can often be dealt with quickly and informally. An informal process really will have no really requirements other than looking into that matter for them and going back to the employee to let them know what you're doing about the issue, how you kind of propose that it's resolved, and checking that they're happy with that. And that's kind of the key part as well, is the communication back to the employee and making sure that they're happy with how you resolve the matter for them. If though, that doesn't work, then you can move on to the formal procedure. So instances in where that formal procedure is used is, as we've said, where an informal procedure outcome wasn't agreeable with the employee, where the employee is not satisfied with the procedure. Again, you're going to then need to look at, well, how serious was it? Did we need to skip forward to the formal procedure anyway, or actually is this issue worthy of going straight to the formal procedure in the first instance? Also, if there's going to be, the formal investigation process is necessary, so it could result in perhaps disciplinary hearings needing to be held, interviewing witnesses, that kind of thing, you really should go down the route of using the formal disciplinary procedure, as outlined probably in your employee handbook or policy. If you don't have those in place, though, you still just follow the general ACAS code in dealing with any of these issues under their grievance procedure. So sometimes you might be taking an employee through, for example, as we've said, a disciplinary process, and then they raise a grievance. So when that happens, you need to look at, is this actually a grievance, or is it a complaint about the part of the disciplinary procedure that they're going through? So that's the first thing we need to do. There isn't an automatic requirement to suspend that disciplinary process. So if this is separate to the disciplinary process, then press on. The ACAS code says where an employee raises a grievance during a disciplinary process, the disciplinary process may be temporarily suspended in order to deal with the grievance. Where the grievance and disciplinary cases are related, it may be appropriate to deal with both issues concurrently. So again, it's about looking at the issue or the problem that's raised and deciding, is this impacting on this disciplinary process, or is it just about the process itself? And like I said, if it's not, then you can press forward with that disciplinary process. Otherwise, suspend the process, hold the grievance hearing, deal with that outcome, and then you still revert back to that disciplinary process. The key difference between, now moving on to the collective grievances, sometimes there may be a grievance that's raised on behalf of 2 or more employees, in which case then you do need to deal with that in a slightly different way. And the real difference between an individual and a collective grievance is that in a collective grievance, you have a group of employees who are expressing their unhappiness with their employment. This can therefore be a bit trickier to handle, because whilst one person may be happy with your outcome, the others may be unhappy with the outcome. So a collective grievance therefore needs to be managed carefully and appropriately, maintaining communication and having honest and open dialogue with those involved to help resolve the issue before it becomes really ingrained and certainly becomes something bigger than perhaps it was in that first instance. And just a note really for me as well is that grievances from ex-employees, this is something that sometimes we will be asked about. There's no requirement to investigate or provide an outcome to an ex-employee. However, you may still wish to investigate that, because there may be some kind of underlying issue that you want to be aware of, and you don't want to leave that unaddressed, because it could be something in your organization that might continue to raise its head. So this way, by sort of completing an investigation into that problem, you'll be able to prevent any further issues in the future. Hope those few little bits and pieces were helpful, just to understand the differences between the informal or the formal procedure and what types of grievances you might receive.
Really good points there, Zoe. Thank you very much. Really good points. And coming back to the case study and following on what we talked about earlier. So the claimant then brought a claim against the employer, and the claims were for discrimination by association. So that's where, even though the particular individual, the complainant, doesn't share the protected characteristics that are complained about, they, because of some sort of link or otherwise, are still able to bring that claim by that association. So there's a discrimination by association claim that's been brought. There's victimization because she raised a grievance. However, she was victimized for it. She was harassed, she was bullied. And also for constructive unfair dismissal. Now, from the business point of view, they are currently staring down the barrel of a claim of around £60,000. Now, not many businesses have that sort of coffer they're waiting to throw £60,000 away at claims. And even if, for the sake of argument, it didn't settle at that high value, there is still a risk of tens of thousands of pounds that businesses are still going to be at risk of shelling out. For example, in 2019 to 2020, the average quantum or compensation awarded by tribunals for discrimination alone were £24,000. So if you have a grievance raised for a discrimination issue, well, that's the average business looking at if that grievance procedure is not handled properly and a claim is brought. So while money isn't everything, businesses equally need to pay attention to the fact that you've got PR to think about, you've got your staff morale to think about, and what you need to be aware of as well is employee well-being. It's really important that, yes, money is important, but money isn't the be-all and end-all when we're talking about our own welfare. So this case study hopefully rounds up to you why it's important to stick with a good grievance procedure, as Zoe has helpfully outlined. Over to you, Zoe, to talk about some preventative measures that businesses can take.
Yeah, so finally, and probably most importantly, is prevention. Just a few things there on our slide, but by having that open door policy where communication is allowed and encouraged, then this will automatically help you prevent getting grievances raised. If you have a culture that means that employees feel comfortable and they feel that they're allowed to raise issues, and they have somebody to talk to and vent to sometimes, then again, another way to prevent these small issues that sometimes start out very small, bubble over a period of time and then become something more than it really needed to be if we'd addressed it in the early days. Like I said, the culture is really important, because you want to encourage your employees to speak up about all kinds of issues, not just grievances, and all things, not just their grievances, sorry, but also to provide the support. So support to managers, because I think that if people had a little bit better understanding of how to manage people, how to communicate with them, just thinking about your instance there, Roy, that may not have happened. Yeah, absolutely. Communication. Make sure that you chat through any issues that get raised to you, and just be mindful of, is a problem being raised to you? Is this a grievance, and do you need to treat it as such?
Very much agreed.
So thanks everyone for listening today. And if, as always, if obviously you need any help whatsoever with any of these types of situations, then please do contact either myself or Roy, and we'd be happy to have a chat with you.
Indeed. Thank you very much.